How's it, everybody? Welcome to the StateProof Fireside Chat number 2, where we kind of talk about everything and anything StateProof, kind of off the cuff. We don't have any set topics as of yet, but we'll probably get there in the future. Based on some feedback I got from Twitter, I might poke at a few things tonight. But first off, everyone, do a short introduction. I'm Carter, proprietor of StateProof Stoic, and I'm trying to do this every Thursday consistently, invite different guests and sometimes the same old favorites. And yeah, we get to talk about everything and anything state-proof and self-sufficient living-wise that can make people more resilient. Well, I think Xavier from the top start there, and then, yeah, we'll work downwards.
Right, I'm Xavier Bapu. I joined last week. I think basically everyone should try to be state-proof as much as possible. So I think in our own small ways, whether we live in a farm or in an apartment or in Sandton, we can all try to get state-proof. And that's my aim here. And I think we've got a good start to a community that can build up. So I'm very excited for that. Yeah. Koketso, you?
Yeah, hi everyone again. You saw me last week, so welcome back to not just myself, but also anyone who's joining us again. Yeah, end of the day, I'm just a guy. Really trying to make the best out of everything, learning as much as I can from people who are smarter than I am, especially around state-proofing your life and being a little bit more self-sufficient and unshackled from the state and all of that. I do come with a few ideas myself, but this is a learning experience more than anything.
I assume I'm next. Okay. What's up, everyone? My name is Dumo. So yeah, I mean, I'm also getting into this being state-proof and so forth. Looking forward to the discussion, seeing what ideas you guys have. I think it'll be a good one today.
Okay, so then it's, I assume, my turn now? Yeah, okay. I wouldn't say I'm state-proof knowing what I do, Carter. I mean, come on, man. But yeah, I'm the Dodge idealist. I'm a pro-individualist. Yeah, and I'm here to, like anyone else, to learn and have a discussion about these things as well. Yeah, that's about it. Short and sweet.
May it never be said that I don't have diverse guests on this show. I only need a woman on here, and I think then we've kind of gone full circle on the diversity cycle. So damn it, where's Dionay when I need her? She's chilling with her sister tonight, so they're having a movie night. So she's sending her regards, and yeah, so we're very diverse and inclusive on this show, it seems. So guys, I think one of the things that we've seen this week, and I've seen it on cited on doing a lot of rounds. It's a multi-pronged approach. I'm seeing AfriForum, I think a bit of Vryheidsfront Plus, a lot of articles from mainstream media, and it seems like this notion of tax revolt is finally gaining the momentum it deserves. And I'm wondering about, and I heard from, I don't know what the source was, but it seems like the ANC had two things on their agenda that they're really pissing themselves over right about now. It's the succession talks that are going around and the tax revolts. Seems like it's giving the ANC a bit of sleepless nights. From my perspective, I think it's great that this discussion is starting, especially since our government has no accountability to anyone. Every time I see money stolen in the millions and billions, I tag SARS, and I'm like, guys, this is tax money. When are you going to investigate these bastards? And not an iota. You don't hear from them. But when a small business does something, Edward Kieswetter comes swinging, and he just wants to move the small business, paying his tax one day late. And I saw there was a case now against Perry Scaffolding, where they paid on the Saturday, and I think SARS wanted to like completely, I don't know what was the action. They wanted to fine them or something, a massive amount, but they were 2 days late. But they stated in their statement, like, guys, we don't have cash flow. And then SARS wanted to come down hard on them. And I think the High Court actually said, no, guys, you can't do this. This is not done in bad faith. They made provisions, they played by the rules, and you cannot go so hard on them. So SARS is actually playing an instrumental role in alienating the small tax base. I think, what are we at? Between 6 and 9% of people paying income tax. It's a very small base carrying everything. So if they keep pushing and the ANC keeps doing ANC things, eventually everyone's going to pay their money in some form of trust. And I think that's what AfriForum is going for, is they're trying to liaise with the legal way to go about this and find loopholes that we can use. So I'd like to hear a bit around the room. What's the notions and thoughts around this?
Who wants to start? Okay, I'll start. So yeah, we spoke about this. Koketso and I, we spoke about this last week. Well, on the latest Men Patria podcast, and yeah, it seems that the tax revolt is gaining momentum, and I think AfriForum's approach was that they said that, look, government, the tax revolt is going to come if you guys don't do anything, so we are going to try and help you avoid that. So, and also, yeah, I agree with this whole thing about like SARS going after small businesses and stuff, you know, for making minor tax offenses, you know, and then again, when it comes to the big guys, they don't do anything. I mean, remember that whole thing with, it wasn't Jacques Paul. I mean, I think Jacques Paul wrote about it. With the whole cigarette thing when Tom Moyane was the head of SARS, right? So, and then, you know, like there was so much tax revenue lost because these guys didn't check shipments and stuff like that purposefully, you know? And then now when it comes to us, I mean, if you do your tax returns wrong, penalty. So yeah, it is frustrating. I mean, that like the people that just, when they make a mistake in good faith, they get punished. But when someone just flouts the laws, it's like, oh, what? Let's just leave them alone. But yeah, so hopefully the ANC can just see this as an opportunity just to make things right, man. Just to, you know, get the tax base going, you know, decrease our taxes at least, because man, when I see how much goes out of my paycheck, I just want to cry, honestly. So,
I mean,
that's my view.
If you look at it as well, you know, for businesses, the tax base for businesses isn't as large as the tax base for, let's say, the employed, as Duma also pointed out. You know, and the problem here is what I can see, because businesses are basically forced to deduct the pay tax, the pay as you earn tax from their employees or on behalf of their employees. We're sitting with a dilemma here that we can't really have a successful tax revolt at the place where it matters the most, which is at the individual level of the employee, because ultimately the employer is going to be held responsible. You know, it's one thing to say to small businesses, or for small businesses, look, we can organize this, but we also need like the larger corporations then to step up. But we're not going to see that. So, you know, if we really want a meaningful tax revolt, we have to find a way to convince the corporates to actually get involved in this. The problem here is that major corporate and government basically go hand in hand. They've basically married, you know, they've got their hands on each other's balls, and that's about it. So I'm actually quite excited to see what's going to happen with regards to, let's say, for example, there is a movement that's going to start, how that pressure is going to be applied to corporate, and then also maybe hopefully we can get meaningful tax reforms by actually moving the pay-as-you-earn tax responsibility away from the corporates and away from businesses and back to the individual, because that's ultimately where change has to happen. That's my view as I see it.
So maybe with that said, I'm just really wondering now how exactly Parliament, with its ANC majority, is actually going to allow legislation to go through the channels that will enable businesses to no longer have that obligation. I don't see it happening. Well, maybe not in my lifetime, but, you know, again, anything can happen. But yeah, I mean, the big thing here would be, we'd need a legislative change at the very least in the National Assembly for something like this to even be possible at a corporate level. But then this brings it back into the discussion, the importance then of having, of putting the ANC under pressure in parliament and taking away that 2/3 majority where, yeah, things like this actually become possible, actually become something that can be actualized and something we can see happening. But with that said, you also have to factor in how many people are actually willing to participate in a tax revolt as well. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like the thought of being a rebel citizen, if I can put it like that. It's for the same reason, whether you agree with the lockdown mandate and regulations or not, you still put on the mask before you enter the shop without waiting for someone to say, hey, please put on the mask, right? It's that same sentiment really of saying, I want to be a law-abiding citizen. I want to be a good person and, be a better man, if I can put it like that. So with the tax revolt, yeah, we probably have to ask ourselves how many people would be willing to participate in this. And now when you take that as a layer and put it on top of how many of those people are actually business owners or managers or, something to that effect, then I think the number starts to thin out very slim. So yeah, probably part of what needs to happen is a compelling case needs to be made at the individual level so that in turn people with businesses and the like can actually potentially participate in this, and then hopefully also participate at the polls where we'll just chip away at that majority that the ANC has.
Okay. Carter, I like that you brought up this topic. It's something I was hoping to bring up tonight. There's a lot to unpack here, guys. Let's quickly do a vote of hands. Are you for a tax revolt? I'm not.
I'm okay. There is.
I don't want to get into trouble.
Okay, and that's great because let me give you the alternative. So I've kind of played with this notion, like how can I do things legally but pay less tax, right? How do I get that 30,000 Rand as a contractor without UIF and stuff being deducted? So what I did is I'll maybe share my story. I'm not as nice as Koketso. I do go in stores without a mask until they call me out. And then I don't argue because, it's just a bit awkward then. But I am that naughty guy that I'll take my chances and I'll run into the store quick. And if no one is saying anything, and on my way out, if they say anything, I'm like, I'll be out in a minute anyway. God, relax. So I am that guy. Sorry, guys. I'm not that obedient. I've had a fierce hate for authority since I was young. I wouldn't say I was bad with teachers because I understand where the authority came from and it was kind of necessary. But if they doubled down on authoritarian behavior, then I became a fucking nightmare. So I've always never enjoyed authority of any level. Even with my parents, sometimes I was bad. So I'm allergic to anything authoritarian. So just putting it out there. So what I did is I created a PTY. Why? You ask? I shouldn't make jokes, sorry. I should be making dad jokes. Because I get the full amount of money. I no longer have to get UIF and everything deducted. So I'm not getting that. If you get like 60,000 Rand, there's like 15K that goes off UIF and taxes. It's insane. Then what I do is I only pay myself what I need. But what I also do is I deduct my connectivity, my cell phone, my car services, petrol, everything from the PTY. So effectively, that money that comes into my pocket, all hot, is my money. And it goes for me to pay part of my rent and my living expenses. As far as I can, insurance, everything I do through the PTY. And in a way, think about this. Let's say you've got 3 PTYs and you pay yourself 7.5 grand from each, right? Let's say 5 grand from each. Screw it. Let's make it 10 grand, round number, 30 grand. From each entity, you're only paying the amount of taxes and UIF based on the 10 grand. So the deductions are far less, that's fewer, right? There's a minimal amount. But if I pay myself from one entity 30 grand, that UIF and PAYE deduction is bloody huge. So there are ways to legally do it. And there's also things like director's fees. I don't know how that works yet. I need to investigate that. But I hear that's also, it doesn't come with any strings attached. So there are legal ways to do this where you can make it more difficult. The only question you have to ask is the people that you're working with or the companies, are they willing to go ahead with this arrangement? With my remote training, I've had a lot of success because I just send them an invoice at the end of the month for my time. I've got a training day. I charge 2.5 grand per day, or maybe if I get further qualified, 3 grand per day. And I tally up the amount of days in the month and I send them the invoice and I get that amount. And then I decide what I need for the month and I pay myself. Because we moved out of the city and my rent is basically 2,900 with a once in a month cleaning included, water, electricity, and internet included, I'm paying 1,450 for rent because it's me and my partner. So that's half that. So my living expenses are so low. So I'm not throwing 6 or 5 grand at rent anymore. So I can pay myself 12.5, 15 grand a month and come out with it after all deductions, because most deductions go off the PTY. So it's not, I think we should not look at this like a full-on revolt with withholding, but there are ways to do it legally. So that's my take on this.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say, put everything in a cash bag and then it's fine. I thought you were going to do that. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's actually a decent plan. That's actually a good plan. But will the corporates jump on that? I don't know, because now I'm just thinking in the law, aren't the corporates obligated to collect the tax from you? Let's say, for example, you work for a specific company, but you have a PTY account. Let's say you have an account for the PTY, like registered with CIPC, everything like that. Now, I think how the corporates will see it, they'll just say, well, look, you working for me, I'm paying you for the service. So, it doesn't matter which account it goes into. The fact is, I'm employed by you. I still have to contribute to UIF and pay as you earn and stuff like that. So, that's how I see it. It's a good idea. I think if you're a freelancer, perfect. I think for me, especially if you're working on contract, that'll be a very good idea. And I'm going to do that if I become a freelancer. Thanks.
Yeah, good luck with the freelancing stuff. It's really a difficult field to get into, and trying to get the clients to actually pay you. Just putting it out there as a previous freelancer myself. But to add to your stuff, Dumo, I think if you go out as a company, and I think that's the difference, company versus an individual contractor. So an individual contractor, you would still be sort of liable to pay some form of tax on behalf of that contractor to the state. But if it's a PTY Ltd, then you are only obligated to pay the value-added tax on the invoice that they issue to you. They are then obligated to pay that VAT to the state. So you're moving the tax obligation away from you as the company to another company. And remember that you write that off on your tax claims as well as an individual business. So there's a lot of advantages to what Carter has suggested. Yeah, it's a bit difficult. There's also a bit of a curve here, Carter, because if you've got 3 PTYs and you get paid like 10 grand, for argument's sake, taking your argument from each of them, eventually there's what we would call an intersection of points where the tax that you would pay, whether you get paid from one company versus the 3 companies, would eventually converge on a single point, and eventually one would actually be more than the other. And it would most likely be that if you get paid by 3 companies eventually, or more companies, that tax bracket will become more in that way, as opposed to being paid in one single company. But again, we're working with statistics then. But it's a good starting point. The problem with larger corporations in South Africa, unfortunately, is not just because they're based in South Africa. That's the least of our worries. The biggest problem is the shareholders, because they've got international shareholders and they want to play by the book. we need to, if this thing is going to be successful, those are also the kind of people that you would need to convince. And I don't think that's going to be very easy. I don't say it's impossible. There will be some that would share our sentiments and go, yeah, you know what, we are paying a bit too much tax, and you know what, we are taking a bit too much responsibility on behalf of the state and the individuals. So let's try and push this. But there will be companies that go, this is not worth a fight. The costs to this and the court battles. No, it's fine. We'll just roll over and do what we do best and, you know, comply. So the question then becomes, how do we get the majority of the people, which will be your employees and your smaller your smaller businesses, your small enterprise, your medium enterprises, that's locally held, and most of which are family businesses, how do we get them on board in a legal way, of course, as well? One thing that I think I'm doing correct is I'm waiting for the last day, up until the last day, to pay my tax, and that's it. Declare it, pay it, done and dusted. And I think if more businesses would do that, there would be a big roll-on effect. But this does not really solve the problem. It only delays the inevitable. And that's the big problem that we're facing, I think.
Okay, so, you know, coming back to me, I was going to say, and Carter, you're quite right. In terms of being state-proof, a PTY is the best way to go. I mean, Ruan pretty much took over most of the points I was going to lay out in terms of the benefits of a PTY. The only thing I'd be careful of is when you're running 3 PTYs and paying yourself, you'd rather not do that. So you'd rather buy a vehicle, put it in the PTY name, use that vehicle, claim for that vehicle, write that vehicle off at the end of the day, and you've got all these benefits from different PTYs where you can have a company laptop, you can have a company car. You don't actually own anything. You know, it's all in a PTY. And when we had the debates around expropriation or without compensation, it's very hard to expropriate from a PTY. They have very different legal rights. You know, a PTY stands separate from you in court. So if you're a PTY, they can come after Carter. If Carter has XYZ in a PTY and it's spread across 3 PTYs, with each property being divided in a 33% share, they're going to have a hard time. They're going to be in court with you for 10, 20 years trying to expropriate your land. But if it's in Carter's name, they can take that tomorrow. It's up to you then to defend, you know? So being state-proof, I think the PTY, every person should have a PTY. It is that easy. 250 Rand gets you a PTY with a BE certificate and everything from CIPC. So you got no excuse not to have a PTY. As poor as I am, I have a PTY. So it's important to have that so you can shelter yourself against the state. They are...
Sorry, just to add to something, at least you got a good BE score. I didn't get that when I registered my PTY.
It's overrated. If I was a woman, I'd have great BE, but I'm not a woman. Anyway, so, you know, you have that safety in a PTY, and this is why the private sector is so relaxed. You know, when AfriForum went ahead and did I think it was IRR and AfriForum that did they wrote letters to all the banks and said, what are you going to do about expropriation? No, don't worry about it. The bondholder will still be responsible. We don't really care about the land. And that's the truth. They don't care about the land. It's about the debt. That's their business. You know, their business is not in buying land. They don't get rich from that. They get rich from the interest on the loans. So they don't really care. PTYs are safe in this country. And because of the laws around PTYs, the Companies Act, various acts, you're very protected as a PTY, more so than an individual. So that is one way of being state-proof. If you remember in our last Fireside chat, we spoke about a barter system. And I think, you know, for smaller deals, that's tax-free. If I give you a bucket of mushrooms and you give me a kilo of tomatoes, there's no tax there. You know, we completely tax. But coming back to the whole tax revolt, I'm squarely against it. I believe it's going to make the country worse. I don't believe it's actually going to help our country. Because what's going to happen is, and I've seen this happen, and it's a weird example to use. When they hijack buildings in Hillbrow, what they started doing is they went into the building and they would convince the tenants that your landlord doesn't care for you. The property is falling apart, the elevators don't work. And they, the tenants were for this because they knew, listen, we're not paying the landlords, that's why the building's falling apart. But this guy's saying we shouldn't pay them again. Sharp, we'll do that. So they decided not to pay the tenants, not to pay the landlords. And these gangsters were keeping, I say gangsters, but they weren't really gangsters. They were more white collar. So they were more fraudsters and scam artists and things. So they had actually set up PTYs and they set up non-profit organizations, and the whole month's rental went into this PTY. Now the landlord is like, I need my rent, and he defaults on the loan. Eventually, 6 months, 7 months, no rental. He can't afford to keep up. They cut the water, they cut the lights. This company then goes and pays the lights and then sues the landlord and takes the building. That's how they were hijacking it. It was completely legal, So it's the same thing now with the tax. Every forum is going to tell us, listen, we've found a way, if they right, if they get it right legally, which I think there's about 6 provisions in the law that allow a body to keep an amount of tax if there's tax abuse, which we do have in South Africa. But a tax authority has to sign off that there is tax abuse. And do you think SARS is going to say there's tax abuse? No, they're never going to say that. So every forum is going to hit a block. But if they get it right, they're going to end up with a issue of compliance. It comes back to what Koketso said. We live in a civil society where people do follow the rules. There's a less than 1% of us don't follow the rules, but generally we all follow the rules. And we're not going to go out now and say we're not paying tax, because at the end of the day, the government doesn't come after 1,000 people. It comes after you one by one. And we standing in a room now, 5 of us are screaming, we're not paying tax. Then they come after myself, they take me out. Now I'm not in the room anymore. Now they come after Carter. Then they come after Koketso. Then there's no tax revolt. It's over. Before it started. Government doesn't attack groups of people. It attacks individuals. And that's why I'm against this tax revolt. But then you look at, I think we've all followed the whole Biden administration and what a disaster that's been. Have you guys seen the news that they need to go ask Congress for more money because the coffers are now empty? And this is this is the issue with socialism. He had student debts, he was doing great things, everyone loved it, and now there's no more money. So who does that sound like? It sounds like Cyril Ramaphosa. You went out, you gave UIF TERS. I was a recipient of TERS. So you gave the 350, and where did the money come from? You've got a shrinking. JSE posted a very scary statistic. The CEO said most of the investors are pulling out of the country. Mm. And it's shocking that is our tax base that's leaving the country. Those are people that were paying tax here. Those are investors that create investment in this country that pays tax, as opposed to the guys that are lining up outside the post office who will never pay tax. They're not going to pay tax. If they get a job, it will most likely be under the tax bracket, and they're not going to be paying tax. They'll be paying UIF, which they end up claiming. So, where's the benefit? You're not getting that. And then it comes to, as well, what Helen Zoll said. I think she said it in a tweet or in an article this week, where she said state capture has always been an ANC policy. They've captured the army, they've captured SARS, they've captured everything. And, I think we've come to respect Helen Zoll for her perspectives that are raw. She, in her old age now, she's got no filter. She says it as it is. And she's quite right. You look at Edward Kieswetter. The man has multiple allegations against him, but he was a so-called clean commissioner. Even I respected him. You look at where Cyril Ramaphosa is now. There's whispers all over the internet from CEOs where they are publicly voicing their discontent with Cyril Ramaphosa. I was so shocked to see one of the cheerleaders of Cyril Ramaphosa actually post something against him. And this is a well-respected CEO in our country. And he's actually going out there and saying Cyril hasn't kept his promises. So you're having this turn of the tide. But in terms of the tax revolt, I think William Petzer came up with that whole organization, had an amazing launch. I was supposed to go. And since July, I think, nothing has happened. The Taxpayers Society of South Africa or something.
Taxpayers Union.
Yeah, Taxpayers Union. That's right, Koketso. Nothing has happened since. And I keep messaging to find out what's happening. Should we donate? Should we not donate? Should we keep, bringing support to it or what? And nothing's happening. And that's the reality with the tax revolt. We're not going to be able to successfully revolt against the government because you revolt on tax, they go to IMF, they take out another 500 billion on the debt. It doesn't bother them. They have unlimited resource. Anyone wants to take over?
So, well, part of my belief with this is specifically now I'm referring to AfriForum and their efforts. Part of my belief is that, and I mentioned this at Manpatria, that they're at a long game here. When you factor in I don't even know what to call it, but them being recognized by the United Nations, for example, soon you couple that with talks of a tax revolt. Consider other factors like how they are building institutions. Yes, they are an institution on their own, but they are building institutions as well to take care of the basics. They already have people in place to do, social work of some sort. And now they're building institutions targeting education. It's only a matter of time before, this quickly cascades into now institutions that will do sewage, water, electricity, especially now that the legal framework is actually in place and is just waiting for a few signatures here. All of this for me is leading up to some form of world-recognized secession of some sort. And if you look at AfriForum, I wouldn't even put it past them to say, okay, yes, secession isn't exactly favorable to everyone, but very well, we can, through some means, maybe apportion a piece of, I'm going to use the Northern Cape as an example. It's the least populous province, large amounts of land. The weather isn't ideal for, a lot of agricultural work and the like. And what is actually valuable, the few that is very valuable from a minerals perspective is already been spoken for. But I can easily see them, saying that we will secede and create a whole new nation for ourselves in parts of maybe north of the Western Cape and let's say even west of the Northern Cape where no port exists. And then they'll start up a new nation, and then they will very quickly, actually build themselves up by building the kind of relations we'd want our own government to do right now. Things like desalination, solar power, that stuff, the best patents, the best IP around that sits, most of it, not all of it, but some of the best IP around that sits with Israel, who themselves live in a desert but we know how our lack of a foreign policy actually treats Israel right now. There's no reason why we shouldn't be thriving as a country with a very large coast and quite a large amount of desert, for us to not be taking advantage of desalination and solar power, etc., etc. This is of course over and above what's under the ground, platinum, gold, and all of that. So I can easily see an organization like AfriForum being at the forefront of some form of secession talk. And this will then receive that rubber stamp of approval, because by the time this happens, AfriForum will be able to say that, listen, we've tried everything. We've engaged government, we've presented options, they'd be able to present a long list of things they would have tried, in order to not come to the point where they want to secede. And at that point, they'll have all the evidence they need. And if you're sitting in front of the UN Security Council for this, it's quite a compelling case, actually, to say that, listen, These guys have tried everything. The only thing missing now is for civil war, in which case that gets messy and all of that. So I think they're lining it up towards that, and maybe we'll see it in our lifetime. Again, I don't work at AfriForum, so I don't know what the behind the scenes are. But definitely, I don't think this tax revolt talk from them came out of nowhere. I think it's a single puzzle piece that's actually part of a bigger picture here. And I have to say, congrats to them. If I'm right somehow, congrats to them on this 4D chess.
It's actually funny you say that, Koketso, because AfriForum, VF Plus, there's about 6 organizations that are all looking at. Their first option from the communication I've made with them is to work together with the ANC government or any coalition government. That's their aim primarily. But they are also very they're trying to set themselves up for session and self-determination, which I think if you read into the VF and you notice what Solidarity and AfriForum are doing, building universities, building organizations of engineering, etc. I don't know if you know that whole university they built was engineered by them. It was designed by them. Architecture, every aspect of that building was, in some way, self-determined. There was no external forces. So we're starting to see that definitely appear through various organizations. Even the DA, a lot of people don't want to notice it, but it is happening before our eyes. I mean, the DA was the first to reach out to Israel, regardless of the South African government, and say, we want a desalination plant here. We're willing to have that here. They've been the first to reach out to the US, regardless of our policies with with Trump, and say, listen, we want Delta Airlines to fly to Cape Town, not to Joburg. We'd like you guys here. And David Mayne, before the great collapse of COVID, he actually achieved that. They landed their first Delta flights here. So you're starting to see, and if you notice the campaign quality, and I took this up with the guy that manages the campaigns in the DA, he's the director. And I told him, listen, there's a visible difference between what you guys are doing in Cape Town and what you guys are doing in Joburg. That needs to improve. You can't go around parading. You won Cape Town. You're not going to lose Cape Town. Don't put all your effort into Cape Town when you need Joburg too. If you get the 2 centers of the, South African economy, you've got the country basically. KZN doesn't actually produce that much to the economy. It doesn't have that great a population in respect of Johannesburg and Cape Town together. I think we account for about 24 or 25 million in terms of the
say rather the tax-paying population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think we've seen that from the DA. We've seen that from a few parties as well, where self-determination or session or Balkanism or however they want to call it, our 9 provinces are probably not going to be 9 provinces for the next 10 years. I don't see it past 2030 with the way the trajectory is. We are getting worse. And as we get worse, it is leading to 2 great ultimatums, which is civil war or Balkanization, where, the Western Cape is a functional entity on its own. Let us cut ties. So if you ask me, I think behind closed doors, these conversations are happening, even within the DA. I don't think it's unlikely that even the DA is considering self-determination.
Look, there's one option also that we're not looking into, because we're talking about Balkanization, civil war, and secession in general. But it could also very well be that with all these moves happening, that certain industries or certain institutions will be taken away from state control and placed in private control as well. That's like Koketso said as well. It's a form of secession. I would call that privatization to the community as opposed to the state. what we also could probably see with if enough of this happens, if enough disregard to state policy happens within the DA, Freedom Front Plus, AfriForum, and Solidarity, if enough of that happens, what could happen would be a sort of economic reform up until to parliamentary level, where the ANC, regardless of two-thirds majority, would have to stare the reality in the face, because that's at that point where these two things would come to realization, either going to the United Nations to champion the secession, or to actually legitimize Cape Town or the Western Cape as a separate state as opposed to being a province of South Africa. But the result of that would be catastrophic in both sides, because no nation, let's be honest, no nation willingly secedes territory to another. There will be conflict, and I think the five of us here can agree that's something that we would like to avoid at all costs, as far as possible. At least that's how I see it, because I'm not ready yet. I still need to buy my tanker before we do this, you know?
I'll add to that and say, at this stage with the riots, we saw the police doesn't have ammo. I don't think our military is in a much better state. I don't think they'll have enough fuel in those tanks and rattles to roll it into the leafy Sandton suburbs at this stage. So I also heard little birds whispering in my ear, telling me how terrible the maintenance regimes are. So, you know, we're back in the good old days when we kind of had to walk around with passes and everything, which we are doing again now, it seems, because we've got these forced vaccinations looming. What they did is they had engineering corps. These engineers would train on the military, paid by the military, and they did all the maintenance and fixtures on the heavy artillery, on the tanks, on the rattles. All of that is outsourced now. They have so little expertise in the military. You used to go to the military to become a pilot or whatever the case might be, or a medic, you know, become a doctor. You can maybe still do it, but I wouldn't recommend it at this stage, because it's all kind of falling apart, and all the facilities are in shambles. So I think if we stick to our guns and actually all of us get guns, I want to see the military and the police rise up against the citizens, because I really don't think they have the resources to deploy in an orderly manner. Have you seen our military people? These are fat people, the police as well. They just eat KFC every day, do as little as possible, man. They're fat. They cannot jog around the block. Like, let's be honest here. Let's be real. Like, these aren't the...
It's interesting you say that, because the other day, they actually left KZN because there was no food. They can't even get their food right. So if you can't feed the soldiers, they won't fight. So that's one way of doing it.
This is true. So that's a very good point. Sorry, Dodgy. I just want to make a point or two that I wanted to earlier. All made good points. I did get cut off for a while, so I hope I'm not repeating anything. With regards to barter, just a short one. Barter is not all. Remember, it's not just goods, right? It can be services and it can be tools. If I'm buying a press now to make apple cider and apple cider vinegar, and also apple juice. And after that, if I make enough money from that, I'll buy myself a still, and then I can make some, I don't know, some apple brandy and some other nice things. You know what? Which I might or might not sell, because that would be illegal if I sold it. So barter comes in many forms. You guys are sure right about that, especially if you have livestock, etc. It gets very interesting. Then I also wanted to add, if you don't have a PTY, or you, like you say, you can only have one PTY, another way to go about it is start earning in euros and dollars, right? If you can go overseas and you can open an account, or you have family members there that can open an account for you. I know you can even go here. There's a Portuguese bank in South Africa where you can open a bank account. And then what I'd go a step further and say, look at changing tax residence. Why be a South African citizen and earn here and pay our corrupt government? If you really want to take it to the next level, you can still stay here and do business, but you just change your tax residency. And then SARS can touch you. So I'm investigating to have Portuguese tax residency, because the income tax is capped at 10%. It doesn't matter how much you earn. for the first 10 years. So I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying here. So I'm investigating this meta of urgency. So I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm going to keep being creative here, because I really don't want to give my money to these crooks. It pains me so much. Every time I look at my payslip, when I still used to have payslips in the good old days, it pained me so much. So I don't know. I just want to get away from them. Last point, and then I'll give you guys a chance. I'm teaching a class of it's mostly a predominantly African class. Young people just finished school. They got learnerships. I have to say I really like their energy. They're quite cool kids. And we talked about process management. So I asked them, like, tell me about a good process in process management that you think works well. And they're like, oh man, Uber Eats is so cool. You order the food, it gets to you. And they're also like, when you're in McDonald's and you know that order self-service kiosk, it's just the best. And they're like, oof, the SASSA Grants, ne? That entire class. And then I said, okay, tell me more about bad service. Where do we see the most bad service in this country? And they just went like ballistic. They're like, the schools, the government, they just steal. And they went on a rampage. And I was just standing there, and I'm like, you guys, you don't know it yet. You might just be libertarians one day. So yeah, I was kind of proud of them. And I was like, I'm seeing that glamour of the ANC where the older generation had that lovely nostalgia about the ANC, and they were like, oh, they're so great, and they're the liberators. These kids did not grow up in that. They grew up with sewage in the streets. They grew up in abject poverty. And I think they might be the change we really need, is the young voters more than anything else. The younger voters seems to be the ones that are saying, hold on, this fucking thing isn't working. And I asked them one question. I'm like, what are you getting for your tax? Are you getting proper education? Are you getting proper medical care? And all of them were just like, no, we're not. We're not getting anything. And I'm like, I rest my case, because I had to get back to the class, and I don't want to be fired for being political in my classroom. But that was the sentiment. And I was actually kind of very surprised at kind of the anger. And they know how they're being taken for a ride here. We're in a state where we're being disproportionately stole from, and we're getting absolutely nothing. If anything, they have these clever stealth taxes, right? Because you have to have a security system. You've got the fuel levies. You've got the sin taxes that keeps getting up and up. They've got all these fucking sneaky taxes that they put into everything. And they're feeling it. And they actually voiced their discontent in this. And I was very surprised about that. So go on, guys.
Or just on the barter system, before I give to Kokitsu. Sorry, Kokitsu. I actually watched a rather interesting documentary about money and money creation and where it all started. And it basically did start at the whole barter system. But basically what they were arguing was eventually the farmer would run out of or not have enough produce to trade or barter for services or for items that they require. So what would happen is he would give a sort of promissory note or a sort of credit note or a sort of promise or an obligation at a later stage, hence the rise of credit. This then later gave rise to what we would call the exchangers, the money exchangers, and the merchant class on that side, and the rise of the modern bank basically stems from all of this. So I'm feeling like, if you're going to go for a barter system, aren't we just kind of reinventing the wheel here? Because eventually this will run into this very same problem, and well, we'll have to look back at what was already there and reapply it then to solve the problems that was solved a few years prior already. So I'm thinking, why not look at what we currently have, the sort of options that we already have, like cryptocurrency and non-fungible assets and stuff like that. There seems to be a lot of promise in that as well. So maybe something to that extent. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think the cryptocurrency is the most viable one. Because I mean, it's so simple, really. I mean, it's just, you can just download an app and you can start earning crypto. Your wallet, again, if you think about it, your wallet, it's private. You get your own private keys, and also crypto is permissionless, and it's instant. Okay, it's not necessarily free. So what is it? It's permissionless, instant, and decentralized. So, the reality is that even if the government starts running after it, they're gonna have a very difficult time, because that token it's nowhere associated to you. They can't trace it. They can't trace. They can get a wallet, but then when they look at the wallet, there's no name like, oh, Dumo Deng is there. It's nothing like that. So I think crypto is probably the most viable option. It's just that now there has to be a market for it. And there's one app that I use. It's called Edgecoin, and on that, right, I was so surprised to see the amount of products that you can buy there with using Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, but crypto in general. Like, you can buy vouchers. So how it works is that there's someone who's selling vouchers for certain stores. Like in America, they have what's the thing, Walmart and whatever, and then you buy those tokens. You buy those vouchers, and then you redeem them at the shop, and that cycle continues. So it seems to me that crypto seems to be the best way to work around it. But SARS is trying to crack down on that. But and then my question is, how are they going to do that? Unless you decide to get your crypto from, you use, let's say, a third party. I'm not going to mention the name, but if you use a third party, they're going to implement this thing called KYC, know your customer. So that means you're going to have to give them details, your ID number, your ID book, a copy of that, and your statements and where you live. So because they want to be compliant with the South African Reserve Bank. And now people are not going to do that, because I heard of companies that actually do assist people to buy crypto. When they wanted to be pre-compliant, they lost customers as a result, because the whole point about crypto is the whole being anonymous and everything like that. So if there can be a decentralized market that is anonymous and that can sell things that are worthwhile, that can pick up pretty well. And I think crypto will be the biggest thing. But then the governments are going to try and introduce their own coins. But anyway, that's another story.
Crony coin.
Yeah. Basically all.
What is the digital rand?
Yeah, you see, the thing that how these third parties probably can get around with it is, and that's me. I probably shouldn't say this out loud because I don't want to encourage people to break laws. But how I would have approached it, I would have approached cryptocurrency not as a currency, but as a commodity, a trade commodity. And that way you don't have to have KYC in that regard. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. So
they're going to ask for KYC.
Yeah,
they're going to ask for it
again. Yeah, because you're purchasing what they would consider a currency. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one for the third party. I don't think there is need for a third party in crypto. I think what we do need is we need to probably have a more educated outreach from our side, probably, or from whoever is in crypto, to teach people like, hey, this is how you open a wallet, this is how the wallet works, and so on and so forth. That way you reduce the need for third parties. That's certainly an interesting field. I've been looking into that. It's quite interesting. Yeah. Okay, so I earlier cut you off.
No, it's all good. Yeah, fireside chat, right? So the funny thing though with especially around crypto and the like, yes, we all know that you don't necessarily need a third party, but part of the problem here is that there will always be a third party for the simple reason that once there are humans involved, right, then exists the realm of opportunity. And with very complex things like a crypto, pretty much anything, in the 21st century that we live in the modern world that we're in, everything becomes an app. And then at the end of the day, he or she with the best UI wins. And then once they've won, suddenly there's value there. So, let's charge a fee for it. That's really where it is. But I mean, yeah, The end game, I think, would be to decentralize everything because maybe I'm wrong. And I think I actually saw the same documentary that you did about money. But really, the pillars exist and are reinforced on the sole basis that they are necessary to facilitate borrowing. That is borrowing at a large scale, the kind of borrowing that is done by entire nations. And so this is now beyond a bond or a car payment and the likes. The borrowing done by whole nations, of course. And until that is no longer a feature, or that's actually in decline in terms of the raw numbers, there will always then be a protection of the banks because they effectively, as a collective, are what enables this. Now, as South Africans, a lot of us don't realize actually that we have one of the best banking systems in the world. I could be at the red bank, and when I send money to the blue bank or to the gold bank, it typically arrives anywhere between now and 48 hours. Other people elsewhere in the world don't have that level of convenience, particularly in your more developed markets. You go to a place like the UK, there'll be banks that target not a segment of the market like we would like to think of it. They're not looking at young adults or, there'd be a bank that exists just to serve the city of Manchester. And when you go outside of Manchester, things get a little bit more difficult. But if you live in Manchester with your parents and all of that, and you and all your friends are on the same bank, then it's very convenient, right? It's a little bit like how if you have an iPhone and every one of your friends also has an iPhone, suddenly the need for WhatsApp falls away. So that's how it is in very developed markets. And over here, we've kind of been spoiled for choice in that it doesn't matter what bank you're in. I can log in and send you money and the money will arrive without any further steps. But if you look at it from a crypto perspective, I think much of the same, people are going to try build much of the same thing. And that will then be done by a third party who will then take the place of the bank. And once that happens, this can only be enabled, of course, by legislation where under the guise of protecting individual rights and people's identities and the likes, then they have to now go into the KYC realm. So I don't think it's avoidable, and it will get there. It's just a matter of how and when. But I like that you brought up that maybe we should think of crypto as a commodity because, again, there's nothing stopping anyone from mining their own crypto. You can't go print your own money, of course, and that's where the big difference is. But you can create your own, your own cryptocurrency with a little bit of assistance from many outlets out there on the internet. And that, for me, is probably what will help sustain it and keep it as a viable option. But we'll see how it goes. So I just want to go back to what Carter was saying now with, the interesting characters that he was interacting with. I have these conversations a lot, particularly with younger guys as well, where you talk about things like, right, what is the actual true cost of life, and for a lot of younger people, they're not aware of these little sneaky taxes. And so these are conversations we actually need to have, particularly with those that are in the early adult life that may not understand things, just out of lack of experience, of course. And it is things like, you're paying sewage levies on a property, but the guys who are supposed to pick up your trash on a Wednesday maybe arrive a few days later on Saturday. And then maybe they don't. But this is a cost that you are liable for, and you dare not pay that thing, you will go to jail, right? So, these are very important conversations we actually need to have with a lot of people because, let's face it, large parts of the population are in rural and township areas where a lot of this is actually unheard of. It's only when you get to the burbs you start finding out that even if I live in a complex, they're going to charge me for my parking bay. They're going to charge me 80 Rand a month for the ability for someone to take out the black refuse bag I put in the corner and actually put it outside and then put it back. You effectively pay not just to live, but for conveniences. And these aren't necessarily conveniences after a certain point in your life. So yeah, we need to drive these conversations, because I think that's what will actually get people into looking at how they can be a little bit more state-proof. Having that value discussion and helping people realize that where your money is supposed to be going, that's not where it's going, you know. And I like what Xavier also mentioned last week about how I think it was Xavier who said that, you know, the Midval's neighbors, Emfuleni municipality, was so terrible at running the municipality that someone came up with the idea that why don't our neighbors in the DA controlled Midval subsidize some of our services. Keep in mind, when you're a resident in a municipal area, you pay for rates and services so that you get rates and services, not necessarily with the outlook that you must subsidize your neighbors who have been squandering their money. So it's little things like that. And I think once these conversations really reach a critical point or mass discussion as a nation, then people will start holding government more accountable, particularly around our tax monies and their tax income, I guess.
Well, talking about subsidization, interesting thing. I think all five of us know this. For example, with our rates and taxes and the electricity bills that we pay, whether you're on prepaid or whether you have a direct meter, for example, you do subsidize a portion of what you pay for towards a poor community in some cases. That's great, dude. Yeah, learn a lot from Carter, please. But yeah, to just get back to the point, you know, I don't think we will ever get to a point where we won't subsidize a portion of society. The question is how much of it and what the quality of it is. Is it worth the amount of tax that I'm paying? Currently, I think I'm not seeing that, not in education, not in service delivery, not in healthcare or anything like that. I mean, you know, we're paying taxes, we're subsidizing all these people, but we're not seeing an improvement in these people's livelihoods, as the ANC had promised since the early days of their liberation from the apartheid government. It gives me also hope that with these conversations that we have with the young adults and stuff, coming up in South Africa now, those are the people that will actually, I think, enact true change. But that would require us to actually, like Kogetsu said, to actually engage with them and have these sort of conversations with them, to actually try and show them like this is how the system works, and there's currently no value being extracted from that, true value towards the community.
You know, I like what Rohan said, I like what Dumo said, and I like what Koketsu said. And just to add on it a bit, basically, you know, the whole concept of money and why we changed from the barter system was trust, you know, trust and convenience. I couldn't take 15,000 bananas and buy sheep if no one wanted 15,000 bananas. So, you know, it's money, and money is just a placeholder for trust. And in exchange for services. But, you know, it's right what I think Dumo said, where the whole idea of banking systems that are centralized, it's mainly around the entire concept of debt and our world debt, where countries actually owe debt to the World Bank, IMF, and to other countries. And you got to understand, they use our taxes that we want to revolt on. They use our taxes to pay for that, and they use, you know, a major portion of the GDP to pay for that. And I think the recent data that came out said by 2024 we're going to be looking at paying 60% of our GDP towards our debt, our national debt. I mean, 60% of your GDP going to your national debt. That country is near bankruptcy. You know, you're in serious trouble at that point, because you don't have money for development. You don't have money to handle social welfare. And as it stands, I mean, social welfare, we got 17 million people on this, and that's grown. I'm sure it's grown after COVID. Those were the stats I was working with in 2019 now. So I'm sure that's up to 23 million, you know, when you factor in the unemployment rate. And then, you know, coming to Bitcoin, I don't know if you guys saw the good news. El Salvador simultaneously went bankrupt and also agreed to use Bitcoin as a national, you know, kind of thing. And then there was a joke about it that maybe Zimbabwe should do the same thing.
In all seriousness, they should.
That's like what's a reverse Uno card, isn't it? Like with bankrupt crypto. It's like a reverse Uno card. It's so good.
So I think Louis kind of touched on it, but it was kind of funny. It's good news and bad news at the same time. So crypto does have a, you know, real place in our world, but the issue is now that the banks are going to, because the banks and government always work hand in hand. And as soon as you're buying your Bitcoin through a bank now, where it has become a commodity, and that's what they're trying to allude to now. And you'll see with FNB, you can buy Bitcoin and things on their trading sites and whatnot. It's not ideal because once the banks have control of it, your identity is out there. It loses the decentralization of being Bitcoin. And then in terms
the best UI, remember what I mentioned.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
easy, the best user experience, the best interface. It'll be so easy that they become the winners in the end.
Exactly. And it does come down, especially in a world guided by convenience, it does come down to the best UI. That is the fourth dimension of our world now. You know, everything is digital. There's a reason we're using this platform instead of Teams now, because this is much better in my opinion. And this is the first time I'm using this. So it does come down to what Koketso is saying, and it's the best UI. If your UI is enabled with AI, you've got a winning platform there. So FNB has the money to do something like that for Bitcoin, where the general person is not going to think, hey, I can mine Bitcoin. They're going to say, oh, I'll just pop on my app and buy some Bitcoin. That's the danger with Bitcoin. Not that Bitcoin is dangerous, but because of all these third parties, like you guys stated, coming into the picture and being kind of unsavory and undermining what Bitcoin is. So I think that's an important factor. And then, you know, with tax, like I'm saying, it services the national debt. And if it's not servicing national debt, I had a discussion with the ambassador to Denmark in South Africa. And we were discussing how Denmark actually, because there's a big misconception about Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland all being socialist. They are not socialist. What they have is a very capable government who works hand in hand. And this is what was said to me by the ambassador. And he says they have a very capable government who works hand in hand with the private sector to deal with issues in the country, because it actually affects the private sector too. If there is serious unemployment or there's serious housing issues, which Sweden currently has. Sweden has a housing crisis as we speak. And when that kind of thing happens, they come together with private sector and they work together, as opposed to taxing the hell out of private sector to get it done, where the government tries to do it on their own. They work together with private sector. And that's a major difference. Now, you know, the socialists are saying, oh, that's socialism. It's not. It's responsible capitalism, where the private sector knows what's at stake and the government knows what's at stake. I saw this funny meme posted by one of the guys that are serious advocates for capitalism in America. And it shows this guy getting off a motorcycle scooter, stealing the woman's handbag and running, and then she steals his bike and goes off. And he's like, this is what socialism is. The government comes, they steal your tax, and then you go and leave the country. No more tax. So, you know, I think that's where that's the points I've touched on. If someone wants to take over quickly.
Maybe let me jump in here real quick, but yeah, I like what you said there about how governments come together with private sector. I mean, I was on Conscious Caracal last week. Yeah, it was last week. Where we were just talking about Botswana and their amazing almost double-digit growth there. And it's exactly the same thing where, you know, Botswana in the 70s, you know, they gained democracy. They're a fully independent state, no longer a British protectorate. And they quickly realized that, okay, we know we have diamonds underneath the earth and a bunch of other things, but we don't have that expertise. but we also don't have roads. So let's get the private sector in for them to actually bring their expertise and set up mining and the likes. And the proceeds of that is what we'll actually build our nation with, starting with our capital city. It's really not that difficult. It's very easy to get done, and it's some very low-hanging fruit as well. And everyone benefits at the end of the day. So it's definitely a solution.
I mean, just to build on that point as well, I've been involved with projects in Zambia and Nigeria, for example, and they basically follow more or less the same sort of approach. Well, not Nigeria so much. There's too many princes and royalty for my liking. Sorry, I've got a thing with monarchies. I'm like very, how can I say it, disgusting individual to royalists, So, but getting back to the point with Zambia and Nigeria and all those places that I've worked with, there is a close hand-in-hand sort of approach to public projects. The mine wants to have the mining charter on a specific mineral in a specific area, and it gets mandated by the state to develop certain infrastructure. Roads might be one of them. Capable sewage and capable running water might be another form of it, and even so far as education in some places. It's a very capable system. This is examples of how private and public can come together to actually achieve a greater good for the benefit of both at stake here, for the public and the private enterprise. The state is just a mechanism in this thing. But on the topic of, for example, America and Biden and the cash flow problems that they're facing. So apparently, from what I can understand, with the whole administration and the fracas that's happening over there, I think job creation was promised to be something like 750,000 new jobs were to be created by this time, at this time and place in America. Currently, what we're seeing is there's only 220 jobs being created, and a lot of people have actually left their employment. So America is sitting with a, how can I say, employment deficit, where they don't have enough people to employ. McDonald's in America, for example, is aiming to employ 14-year-olds. And now the socialists might go and say, well, you see, that's because the economy is working. It's like, no, actually, it's not. There's not enough employment. There's not enough people that want to get employed because of the systems that's in place. It's not working. There are employable people.
Sorry, Doji, just to add, do you know what the main things are that's creating this?
Socialism in general.
No, they raised the minimum wage to exorbitant levels. What is it now? Was it $30 now? $15 or $30?
It's 15 from last I heard. 15 or something.
And now they're also giving them an unemployment fund, which basically pays you more to stay at home and do fuck all. So they're incentivizing laziness.
It's $1,200 a month.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What?
Yes, Dumo. We're in the wrong country, my comrade.
16,500 rand.
Cheapest.
Let's go do some mostly peaceful riots in America. And they paid for it.
I know people with degrees who earn that amount, bro. Yo, guys are doing that to
Especially
stay at home.
humanities degrees and gender study degrees, for sure.
It's as easy as
seriously,
that.
like specialized ones, bro. Yo.
So
let's just go.
And Rowan, just to tell you a funny story here quickly. The stimulus checks, I think, went out in August. No, actually before that. I think it was June, July. $1,200 a piece was promised once a month, but they don't have the money for that. And they canceled student debt simultaneously. So now the debt that you were servicing for your degree is gone. You now have an income. And some of the guys were so clever, they used that income to invest in Dogecoin and Bitcoin, and they turned $1,200 into $50,000. They then bought Lamborghinis and strange and wonderful things.
So that is smart.
It's a big roll-on effect, really, honestly. And I mean, look, the money doesn't come from nowhere, right? It has to come from somewhere. Whether it's the bank creating a loan or whether it's from the taxpayer bracket, eventually that money has to get paid back. It's all about checks and balances at this point. And I find that when people talk about banks creating money and things like that, they don't really understand the monetary system that much. I don't agree with the monetary system. I think there's a better system that we probably can use and that we probably should use. It's crypto, by the way. But at least it's not something just for free. That's the point. I always said, for example, if you take out a loan, it's taking from whatever is in the future to purchase something that you need here in the now. And then time accelerates faster because now you've got this monster chasing you, which I call interest, that you need to pay back. Because whatever you take from the future comes with a cost.
Exactly.
Guys, can I just jump in here? Because there's one important aspect. So we covered the minimum loan that was increased. And then the worst thing, the slam dunk on the economy is now, if you're a landlord, the people can stay rent-free.
Wait, before we go on to that, that was actually being contested now in the Supreme Court, I believe. And I think if I watched Viva Frey, for example, Viva Frey and I think Barnes, they were actually talking about this, and I think that was overruled or overturned. So eventually that will return to normalcy. The impact on that.
But they continued anyway.
No, this is now recently. This is, I think, in the week or last week. Before that, they just snuck it out illegally, basically.
Yeah.
From what I can understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the monetary system and voting season, have you guys seen what happened with Eskom? Soweto gets wiped. How much? 5 billion? How much?
5.3 billion, and then they increased the tariff by 15%. So basically, you are paying for the write-off.
Exactly. It's crazy. I mean, I was watching Morning Shot today. They said about people are spending like 30% of their salaries just on electricity, and people are actually making illegal connections in suburban areas. And I'll admit to you, I've seen it happen right in front of my eyes. Suburban areas, guys making illegal connections. You thought you woke up in the township, but no. This is like in suburbia.
Leafy Sand and Boot.
Guys,
Yeah,
if you excuse me, I just need to go get my pliers quickly, and I've got some wire. I'll be back.
And the worst thing is that like they're so smart now, man. They take the one end from the meter and then they just connect it right to the box, so then nothing goes through the meter. So then you just using electricity for days on end, and your meter staying still, and then you get the bill 0.00.
Yeah,
like,
it's
crazy, man.
I remember when I bought my house a few years ago, before they switched on the electricity, a friend and I opened up my meter box just to see what the hell's going on there, and there was a sort of illegal connection as well. A portion of the house goes through the meter, another portion of the house was illegally connected. So we changed that because I was like, no, you know what? This is going to come bite me 7 times over. So we changed that. Stupid as I was. But I mean, like,
such a little bitch, man.
Yeah, it's like, if I knew I was going to pay as much as I did now for electricity, I would have kept it. Fuck it. Like, just keep it running. Keep the meters like running half my house only, But yeah, it's really weird. People bribe the people that do the pole connections to keep the pole connection on. It's cheaper to pay 750 Rand a month than it is to pay the water and electricity bill. That's the God honest truth.
Yeah, one day I'm actually gonna go on this rant about these electricity prices. The day's getting closer and closer, and I don't know how often you guys see me rant, but when I do, my face changes. But I mean, ultimately, Eskom, I think I mentioned this week as well, that Eskom is raising prices because they need the money, but their price increases is exactly the reason why we actually here having this sort of conversations where we can actually explore some of the alternatives. And credit to us, when we do something about it and become less reliant on Eskom, that only results in less money for Eskom, which was the whole rationale for increasing the price in the first place. So it's a case study for how to actually shoot yourself in the foot. But again, Maybe I'm saying this because I'm a business analyst and, I'm formally trained to think this way. I don't know. But yeah, it's really baffling. It reminds me a bit like the e-toll, where at some point the cost of administering e-tolls exceeds the actual revenue collected. So now Sanral, which needed the money, is now running at a loss.
Yeah, dude, it's exactly that. You have to be really cuck at fucking up a monopoly. Like, you are the sole provider and you've got all the cards in your hand and you still manage to fuck that up. Like, you have to be so, but that's why they procure rooms for like 50,000 rand and they just crony capitalism. And that shit was still happen until recently, eh? Like, Underrated did fire a few people as far as he was allowed, but I'm still like, guy, this will end badly. Because same as Dorji just said, like, you'd rather futurely invest in panels if you can, if you've got a freestanding house, right? I know some of you guys are in apartments, and fuck, I hope you can have a solar panel against some of your windows because you don't need it. But that's the way you should think. And the way I'm seeing it as well for self-sufficiency, if you produce your own food, you're also hedging your best bets against inflation and fuel increases and electricity increases that drives the food prices up. If you're growing your own, even if it's just a little initially and you span that out, you're immune to that. You're using a bit of water, a bit of fertilizer, and a bit of love, and you're growing your own food. That's one of the big reasons why I want to become self-sufficient. And then nothing in that garden goes to waste, right? The scraps goes to chickens or to your worm farm. If it's out of season and you start seeing, okay, my stuff is going to go off, you can pickle or ferment or dehydrate it. You can use everything. You've got this entire zero waste cycle that you employ, where nothing that you use goes to waste. All your bottles gets recycled. All your electronics that break down gets put in a corner, and once you have a day, once a year, you take a fucking sledgehammer, you bash that shit, you take all the copper out, you've got a good copper stash, you've got glass, you've got, let's say, tin, and you take all of that once a year, and you actually get some money for it. So hence, get a moosedrom, have recycling barrels at your place. If you can, again, if you're living where I am on a farm, I can do these things. So just have to be resourceful, man. Take everything and use it as far as you can. And make hay, hey?
Yeah. I think, sorry, Xavier. You go. I'll wait. I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, so, Kara, I agree with you because, I'm living in an apartment now. And like I said in the last Fireside, I've got, I don't know if you guys, I told you guys last week I did my tomatoes. So I bought 6 kilos of tomatoes at discount from Macro, bottled it. And, well, I only had one unsuccessfully sealed bottle, which exploded, but it happens. Anyway, this week I started working on the dehydrator. So I've had a dehydrator for like 2 years. And I've been kind of undisciplined on it. So, you like your ginger skins and things, I started using that for dehydrating it and then using it to make essential oils. So I can put that around the house and the house smells nice. And then, your dehydrated fruits and veg that are going off. So the new rule is now the minute it's been in the fridge for more than a week, I dehydrate it. And then I can always use it, like I've made this Italian rub for meat, which was dehydrated tomatoes and salt, coarse salt, black pepper, and oregano. And it tastes lovely. Made it myself. If I had to have bought it from Woolworths, I think I would have paid about $60 for a small, pepper-style grinder. And then plants, even in an apartment, I've got my basil starting out now. So hopefully in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I've got a good crop of basil. So it's possible. And then, in terms of the recycling, I kept all my, you guys know the 2-liter Coke bottles and the 1-liter Coke bottles, etc. I've kept all of that for about a year. And it ended up being, I think, 57 bottles. And luckily, Centon has a machine where you put the bottle in, it reads the barcode, recycles it for you, gives you a rebate, either in airtime or in vouchers. So these machines are set up in Sandton City's food court and also near, I think, the Clicks entrance. And I put my 56 bottles in there, and I got, I think it was 28 Rand. So, not much, but at least I got something as opposed to throwing it in the garbage. And those guys that are coming around and blocking the streets collect it and then they take it. Because I believe some of these recyclers, for that big trolley they push in, they can earn 300 a day. So in different areas, they work in different areas. And just on the Coca-Cola bottles, without anything else they find in the trash, just on the Coca-Cola bottles, I spoke to one of them and he says he's making 300 Rand a day. And I'm like, at this point right now, I'm not even making 300 Rand a day. Maybe I should go help you. So, it's very interesting how much recycling has grown, even with paper. When I joined my current company, they had massive stacks of archives that they were just going to throw out. And I actually managed to get, A4 copy paper that's been printed on. I actually managed to get a contact with one of the recycling centers in Wynberg here. And they paid us, I think we recycled every 12 kilos, we got paid 16 Rand. So considering, you're paying 300 Rand for copy paper, you're now going to get something back for it. And I think we ended up paying for the entire Christmas party in 2019 with the money we had gotten from recycling paper that 3 months. Within 3 months, we made, I think it was 2,900 on recycling paper, just the copy paper. So there's different levels. I'm sure if you guys go to any, like if you're living in the city like me, you can go to Wynberg or City Deep or any of the areas that have a recycling center. Just get a printout or a price list from them of how much they pay for each thing. I know some bottles are worth more, glass is worth more, paper is worth more, cardboard as well, corrugated cardboard comes quite costly. So, definitely you guys can make quite a bit of money on recycling. The tech is a little bit harder, I've noticed. But when you do get someone who will recycle or buy the tech from you, it's a small fortune. I think I recycled 6 phones and it came up to 300 Rand because they've got platinum and gold in it. So these guys smelt it down and they take that platinum and gold out. So there's big money in recycling, I must say.
So who's going to answer Nkoba Shabangu here?
I love it when you speak back.
So it's
he's one of my students, and today as we went out of the class, so I'll leave this as the final question then, because I see we're running out of time. So let's answer this and then just give a short, succinct exit remark, all of you. But let's go and tackle this monster first. So I spoke to the class today and I explained why potentially decentralization is the salvation of us all, because currently we are all funneling our money to a central treasury, and then the state decides how much resources each municipality or area or community gets back. So it's a total mess. I think I'm on a body corporate, so I understand how it works. So you're on a non-profit, you get the money, and then you decide what things are the most important and you fix them accordingly and you manage those funds, and there's full transparency. So the same way that a trustee kind of system works, you'll have that on a local level where you crowdfund it and then obviously it will go that way. So I kind of explained that concept just for context. So yeah, guys, what's your feeling on his question here? And go.
Well, if I can answer that, because this looks like the idea of Pan-Africanism, and my main critique on Pan-Africanism is simply this: that even if you decentralize it, eventually it'll collapse in and of itself. The problem with Africa as a continent as a whole is there's so many cultures, so many language differences and religious differences that it's going to be a nightmare to try and unify them under a single sort of cause. Never mind a government, but a cause in this instance. The best way to unify a nation is to, as Carter pointed out, is to literally decentralize them to the point where each municipality basically can determine the tax income and distribution of that. But there are also problems with that model as well. And I mean, with decentralization comes in more chaos as well, because it's the law of thermodynamics or entropy or whatever you want to call it. You know, it reverts back to chaos. Another thing that we also have to remember is that the continent was colonized, and the borders that are currently there are drawn in such a way that it divides literal tribal nations as well, and cultural groups as well. So there's a lot of difficulty in trying to just bring them together, and then to decentralize it, however you want to do that. That's how I see it.
All right, I'll answer next one. So Ngaba, I think just to build on what Dodgy said, I think the thing about Africa as well, it's massive. It's a massive continent. It spans across the north and southern hemisphere, which means that there are two different climate regions. If you go into Central Africa, the Central Africa, it's really hot there, you know. So and also, I mean, if you look at the waterways in Africa, they're not like Europe, where in Europe and in the United States, just to give us a perspective, even though the Nile River is the longest river in the world, the Mississippi River has more water than the Nile River. And also there's a lot of waterfalls in Africa, which makes transportation across the rivers very difficult. So Africa's infrastructure, or not infrastructure, but just natural structure, is very it's very tough. It's a very tough place to be in. So if you're going to try unite everybody under that, it's going to be incredibly difficult. As Dodgy said, there's so many languages and cultures. I mean, remember, it's not like, I mean, even among, if you look at, let's say, for example, let's just take sub-Saharan Africa. And if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, again, the languages that exist there, even though they fall under the same language tree, it's so much, it's crazy. So I think for me, it's like, you know, uniting Africa, it sounds great on paper, but like when you try to implement it, it becomes very difficult. So the model that we have now in Africa is, you would argue and say, it is decentralized. And perhaps to make it better, it needs further decentralization. But yeah, I mean, I just think that it's a very ambitious project that requires a lot of control.
Yeah, maybe I'll shoot off now. The gents already mentioned really what I was going to start off with, but maybe just to add on to that. Firstly, the whole concept of unifying is actually a myth. It doesn't work. It has never worked. It doesn't work. The largest countries in the world right now only remain so because you typically have one group oppressing all the others. Case study, largest country in the world, we look at maybe Russia and China. You know, Russia's cities, the major cities are off on the west part of the country, but over on the eastern part of the country, you know, towns, cities, they are heavily neglected. People there don't speak the same dialect of the language as those in Moscow, for example. And so the reason it would be better to split everything up is to actually factoring in culture, allow people to actually have a government that reflects who they are, not have one grand project. I'll use myself as an example. I'm Motswana, right? Grew up in Mafikeng, moved to Joburg in 1998. And one of the first things I realized is, why is the province called Gauteng, but at every corner I'm expected to speak isiZulu? You know, for example. That's just one thing I can bring up. But yeah, unity or unifying, it's actually a myth. There is a whole lie around unification. And if you really want solid examples, all you have to do is really cross over into Botswana, where in Botswana, they only have two official languages. It's Setswana and it's English. Simple as that. And because Setswana is the primary language, the 7 o'clock news are in Setswana. The signs in public buildings and public areas, they are in Setswana. You cannot be in Botswana and live in ignorance, live in blissful ignorance, saying that you will not learn a single word of Setswana. And what that does is, big as the country is on a landmass level, it actually allows people to come together unified by a language and not by the fact that they are African or they are black or anything like that. So, yeah.
Okay, let me try and answer it as well. I think it's a very good question. And throughout Africa's history, you must know that we each gained independence separately. Africa wasn't just given independence altogether. So you had different countries that have grown and, developed ideologies on their own. South Africa being one of the newest independencies in the African continent has been a key voice in the idea of a Pan-Africa. And Thabo Mbeki, I think it was, came up with the idea of the United States of Africa. It was a very ambitious plan. He went out, spent a lot of money giving, I think he actually set up most of the African Union as we know it today, the Pan-African Parliament, all these bodies that don't actually do anything, despite being represented by all of the countries in the continent. And the major issue has always been the issue of identity. When you look at North Africans, you look at Central Africans, and you look at Sub-Saharan Africans, we are each very different. And then you look at the concept of Pan-Africanism, which people like Sankara came up with. And Sankara was one of the great voices of Pan-Africanism, who is actually recognized today mostly as a father of Pan-Africanism. But he came from Burkina Faso. That's a small country. And it's all the small countries asking for a unified Africa. You don't get Nigeria asking for a unified Africa because they're happy. In Nigeria is, in my opinion, it's far worse than South Africa in terms of the identity crises, because there are so many groups. There's been civil war between these groups. We've never had that. We've had issues with, Zulu mobilization, as our president calls it. But we've never had civil wars where one tribe tried to actually exterminate the other tribe. And Nigeria has had that. So they're not interested in Pan-Africanism at all. Ghana is very happy in their independence. They're very happy with what they've grown. They're not willing to share it with the rest of Africa. So I think the problem comes in with unifying the continent. It's a few voices. It's not a lot. It's like Twitter. There's only a few South Africans on Twitter, but you might think the whole of South Africa is on Twitter. It's not true. So Pan-Africanism is a very good idea intellectually. Physically, it's impossible. I think Thabo Mbeki found that out. Even if he had 10 terms to complete that project, South Africa would be the one paying for a united Africa, with everyone else not really taking advantage of it. We are now seeing an increase in nationalism, which is actually breaking up America. I think you can see the fraction. It's starting to break up the way it was before the Civil War, where you've got the red states, you've got the blue states, and everyone's doing their own thing. The whole key of making a United States is the rule of federalism, where each state would still have its own, autonomy, despite being part of the United States. So they were still in charge of their own laws. So, there's stupid laws in like Alabama where you can't eat ice cream during the night. And there's silly laws like you can't wear underpants. And they each have their own very unique laws that are completely, if you had to take the USA as a whole, you'd be shocked that you walk into another state and different rules apply completely. For example, this week, Texas said you can now carry open, which is, concealed carry was always the major thing. So now it's an open carry where your gun can now be exposed and you can show that you're carrying a gun. You go into New York, that would be a arrestable offense, but you're still in the United States. You're a United States citizen. So these are the issues you're going to have. And I can see within the next 2 decades, America will break up, Russia, as soon as Putin, because there's 2 ways of gaining unification. One is through force and one is through agreement. America and the EU was through agreement. Everyone came together after World War II and after the Civil War and said, you know what, better to have one united nation. And basically, that worked for a bit of time. And now we're walking into a phase where people want to be identified. There's never been a stronger demand for identification in our planet than ever before. People want to identify as a tree. 20 years ago, that would be insane. They'd send you to the mental asylum. Apparently now in America, a man can menstruate. I've never seen it. I don't believe it's scientifically possible, but apparently he can. So, we're dealing with all these identities. I don't think unification is the priority in the world. And decentralization is looking very much like the future in everyone. We started seeing this in EU in Catalonia, which ended up being, it failed horribly because they decided they would take the diplomatic route, and there is no option for a diplomatic route if you're going to do decentralization and cession and independence. Independence always attracts some sort of blood. That's just how it is. So decentralization slowly would be the best way.
Yeah, so I'll just end off by saying, in a world that's increasingly becoming decentralized, it would go polar opposite to where the world is going. It would be so counterintuitive. Then I'll just add to what all of you said. I think all of you actually did a great job in explaining this point. But I'll also add to it that I'd also say that you also have those countries, the Zimbabwe's of the world, the Greece's of this world, that they basically bankrupt countries, and then they rely on the stronger financial countries to actually achieve anything. And they just become these leeches financially. And also, like, if you look at the EU and what they've done there as well, there's very bad actors on the EU. There's I think China's also speaking to human rights. The Taliban also wants a seat there. All these terrible actors get onto these things and it becomes a farce. And also, then again, we're going back to centralized power, which we are allergic to already in the country level. We want to move away from that. Now you want to enforce it on a Pan-Africa level. So like you then say, you don't represent your people at all, because you become this homogenous blob. And that's something I think you won't see happening in Africa or anywhere anytime soon. And good on America. I mean, they've got their federation, right? So each state kind of gets to have autonomy on how they do things, what things they'll enforce and what things they won't. Unlike South Africa, where we're talking about succession. Oranje did it. I'm spoiler alert, they're in the show next week. So if you guys want to talk about succession and being self-sufficient, yeah, we'll go that route. So that's exactly it, right? They broke away a long time ago, and they've just becoming more self-sufficient. And I myself and DNA visited there, and it's a wonderful town. It's clean. People seem to be doing well. They created their own breweries, their own wineries, and little microeconomies there. So power to them. So yeah, that's my contribution. So I just want everyone to thank everyone for attending tonight. I think this was a really great chat. Next week, like I said, I've got Oranje on. I'm trying to get the Cape Independent Party, that Handsome Devil Jack, on as well. And if you guys are up for a chat, feel free to join me. We can chat offline, as they say. I hate that saying. And then we can chat about it. So yeah, everyone just say a brief goodbye, and I'll end it here in a minute or so.
All right. Cheers. Thanks for having me on, guys. It was awesome. I love this conversation.
Yeah, thanks again for having us on, Carter. It was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, same for me. Really had some fun, and yeah, hope to be back soon.
Yeah,
Cool.
thanks. As usual, not enough time, too much to talk about, but I'm glad we had the conversation, and it was actually, I learned a lot from you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very stimulating. Duma, I think you're the only one in this discussion that's not yet on the group, if I'm not mistaken. Just DM me your email. I'll add you to the team. StateProof Stoic Pioneers, trying to get up and running there. I'll have some announcements next week on the way forward. But basically, it's a community I created where we've got a Microsoft team with all the different channels, bartering, beekeeping, brewing, and people can just go bananas. They can post pictures. If they're producing food, there's even a food production section. So the idea is also to link content to these sections, right? So if you guys did an episode about something, I need to add a crypto one as well. Crypto is important. So if you've done an episode on crypto, please share that content. If you watch another show that there's an extremely exciting episode about that, feel free to post. It's a community-driven thing. Again, it's free market, right? Everyone gets to say their thing and do their thing until they're a big asshole. Then we'll take him to a gulag, and then we'll have a good chat with him, a strong chat. But until that point, yeah, Dumo, send your details. Everyone else, get active in the group, share great content, and yeah, I'll see you all next week again. I'll make a podcast of this episode and post it as well. So cheers, everyone. Have a great evening.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.